Well, you know, it's rather hard to get a headline in the UK at the moment with the World Cup and Brexit fallout all dominating the agenda, but that may well change when Donald Trump drops in on Friday. Will the visit achieve anything of political importance or be drowned out by the protesters? You're watching Roundtable with me, David Foster. Mr. Trump's core supporters, well, they simply can't get enough of his all-American policies. But across the world, his controversial rhetoric, his anti-immigration stance, his attitude towards women, well, they've all caused uproar. So what kind of welcome can he expect to receive when he touches down in Blighty?
He's one of the most controversial US presidents in history. And this week, Donald Trump is coming to the UK. His state visit was downgraded to a working trip amid threats of protests and boycotts. What will this visit mean for the US and UK relations? And will this be seen as an endorsement of his policies and rhetoric? A day after attending a NATO summit in Brussels, President Trump will meet Queen Elizabeth II in London. The Queen has met almost all US presidents since 1945, an honour critics say the president does not deserve. British Prime Minister Theresa May and Trump are expected to discuss a number of topics while focusing on security and defence. Despite both being on the conservative side of politics, the pair disagree on many issues, including relations with Russia, trade wars, Iran nuclear deal, the US embassy move to Jerusalem, and climate change. Trump does not take criticism well, and May has branded his immigration policy inhumane.
This is not something that we agree with. This is not the United Kingdom's approach.
The two countries have been close military allies and NATO partners, reaching back for decades. But things have changed since Trump took office. The president has often criticised the UK on Twitter. He's also retweeted racist anti-Muslim videos published by Britain First.
Action is needed now, not a slap on the wrist.
Trump was scathing of London Mayor Sadiq Khan's response to last year's terror attacks in London.
President Trump can't silence me.
Labour politicians have repeatedly demanded the cancellation of the visit.
If he's allowed to come to this country now, he should be treated as anyone else who breaks the law and charged with inciting racial hatred.
Thousands marched on Parliament to protest the initial decision to offer Trump a full state visit to Britain.
No state visit!
1.8 million people signed a petition to cancel the invitation because he might embarrass the Queen. Mass protests are now planned during his visit. Over 50,000 people have signed up in London. And a group of activists have commissioned a 6-metre-high inflatable of the US president to fly over Westminster when he visits. Brexit means Britain is more dependent than ever on an alliance with the most unpredictable US president in living memory. What will President Trump's visit really achieve? With relations between the two countries already strained, are darker days ahead for the historic Anglo-American relations?
Very glad to say that with us at the Roundtable we have Sophie Walker, the leader of the UK Women's Equality Party. Shabbir Lakha's here. He's part of the Together Against Trump protest. In fact, he's the organiser. Gina Reinhardt we have with us, senior lecturer at the Department of Government at the University of Essex. And Drew Liquerman, Republican overseas spokesman. Drew, let me come to you first of all, because this is something we were talking about just before we went on air. Normally, British news doesn't get a mention in the US, but you say the networks are going crazy about this.
Yeah, you could turn on any major network in the US and everyone's talking about protests in London, they're talking about the mayor in London, and they're talking about this giant inflatable balloon. It seems to really have captured the attention of the American media, something that really, you know, unless it's a major event, it's something that really just isn't picked. This isn't something I think that would normally be talked about so much across all news stations in the US.
These protests could be embarrassing for him, perhaps, and the Republicans, if they are shown on American networks and he doesn't get the respect which he believes he should get?
Well, look, I think these protests will be embarrassing, but I think they're going to be embarrassing for the people that are actually protesting. I mean, flying a giant balloon across your city, trying to keep really one of the most important world leaders, if not the most important world leader, out of your country. I think a lot of people will think less of, I hope this doesn't happen, but I think a lot of people will think, moderates will think less of our relationship, and look, it's going to rile up the left-wing base in the U.S. They're going to love it. It's going to rile up the right-wing base in the U.S. They're going to hate it, but it's going to rile them up.
It's called freedom of speech, isn't it?
Oh, it's a beautiful right. I'm not saying I just want to say I love the right to protest. I'm not criticizing anyone's right to protest. It's a beautiful right. It's more of attacking reasons of protesting. But no, it's great to see people protest. It's great to be in a free country like that. So no, I'm not criticizing anyone's right to.
But why have the protests? I mean, he's a United States president. Love him or loathe him, he deserves some respect, does he not?
The level of respect he deserves, I think, is directly linked to the level of respect that he shows other people. I mean, the Women's Equality Party is going to be out protesting all day. Our members are going to be very active. We have got speakers participating in the rallies. What we are saying is that, I mean, I have to say a thank you to Trump, actually. He's one of our chief recruitment officers. He has made it very clear that we don't actually have to debate whether sexism actually exists, whether racism actually exists, you know, haven't women got enough equality. He's made it very, very clear that misogyny is a serious problem. And I think that what Theresa May needs to take on board is that this, you know, now that this visit is going ahead, it should be used to reset this relationship. It's not an equal relationship.
Can we get on to that in just a moment, Sophie, if we may, what you think,
yes,
what
absolutely.
message she should give him. But actually, President Trump's not going to give a damn about what he sees on the streets, if he sees it at all.
Well, he's going to be hermetically sealed off. He's running away. He's not even coming anywhere near London. But I suspect I shall be watching his Twitter feed with great interest at the weekend when he's all cosied up in his golf club and getting cross while we laugh at him.
What can you achieve with these protests?
Well,
it's going to be dismissed, aren't they? He's going to be looking somewhere else, talking to somebody else. There you go.
I think what we've seen is that since he got inaugurated as president, he was meant to come to the UK 3 times before this, and he cancelled them. The last time, very thinly veiled about the US embassy, but it was clearly related to the protests. And we've seen that he's completely avoiding London. So the protests do matter. He clearly cares about them. That's why he's avoiding them. So in that sense, we've already been victorious. And the point is to have visible and vocal opposition to him and the things that he stands for.
OK, Gina, let's talk about this so-called special relationship in the light of this.
Right.
Is there such a thing?
The special relationship is something that the UK cares a lot more about than the US does. And it is more special to the UK than it is to the US. Most people in America have never even heard this term and don't actually hold the relationship to be particularly special over other relationships that the US has. So in terms of these protests, I don't think they're going to affect the way Trump behaves, and other than the fact that he's eschewing coming to London, I think that at the most he's going to say that they didn't happen and that it's fake news and that it's being made up if he acknowledges that, you know, their presence in the news.
Nash Riggins, an American writer living in Scotland, an article in one of the UK's major online news sites, The Independent, this week, says Trump's half-decent rapport with Britain gives the president a whole lot of undeserved credibility in terms of his administration's foreign policy capabilities. So looking like he's good in Britain, looking like he has a deal with Britain is kudos.
That's true. That is key to him, at least, because otherwise he wouldn't keep trying. He wouldn't keep trying to come here. It's clear that the rest of the world wants to see a decent relationship between the leaders of the UK and the US. And that's what he's trying to show with this and what his staff is trying to show with this visit.
But out of Europe, Britain matters a little bit less or a lot less to the United States.
Quite a bit less than I think the UK wants it to matter, which is not to say that it doesn't matter at all, but it's very clear that Trump is pursuing several isolationist policies and several policies that are not favorable to the UK or what the UK would agree with or want. So he's not making choices based on the UK's position.
On the other hand, 1991, I'll quote him here, Raymond Seitz, described as the last brilliant American ambassador to the UK, warning, quote, never forget that the US is only interested in Britain insofar as Britain is a player in Europe and it's looking towards Asia. If Britain's not part of Europe, Britain doesn't really matter, does it?
Well, if Britain can't be used, then Britain doesn't matter as much. So to the extent that Trump can use the UK to make himself look good or to pursue his other ends, he will do that.
I do agree that the term special relationship isn't as popular, but if you talk to your average person in DC and you say, who's our greatest ally, they're either going to say the UK, France, Israel, or Japan. But going back to the previous point about the protests being successful or being victorious, look, I get that sense in a very short-sighted view. Look, if you want to be victorious, look, our protests were so great, Trump didn't come or Trump left early. Well, what do you get from there? You're leaving the European Union. The US president just left your country. He doesn't view the relationship as important. He'll go to France and talk to France. He'll talk to our Asian allies. He'll talk to our Middle Eastern allies. Your victory is that you're out of the EU and you're not dealing with the US.
But he's also a man who takes umbrage, isn't he? So if he sees something he doesn't like here, he may sulk about it, and that wouldn't be very good for Britain.
Look, I don't think Trump will really care. I think he's here to do more important things than worry about some protests, to be honest. But that being said, though, this is what, getting back to how important it is to know, what do you guys want for a victory? Do you want to be out of the EU, not dealing with the US? Is your main player going to be Qatar? Is that going to be your closest ally? Is it going to be Iran?
I can tell you exactly what.
Saudi
yeah,
Arabia?
I can tell you exactly what we'd like. Yeah, done. Done.
You think those are going to be the primary allies of the UK if it's not the US? It's going to be Yemen.
Well, look, they've shunned the European Union. They've shunned the US. Who are you? Who's your next greatest
ally? They're not
ally?
shunning anyone.
I think we have to pause and I think we should actually just assess for a minute what a deal means with a man who reneges on all of his deals. So the point that we are making here is not just that this man stands for racism and sexism and division and fosters fear and hatred as a core part of his administration. But we're also very conscious, because it's been a terrible week for Theresa May, that she is going to want a deal. She's going to want to be able to come out and say, we've had these wonderful discussions and we're going to have a great deal for Brexit. Now, I'd like her to be considering what that actually means. And I would like her to be thinking also about her other priorities in terms of what she's laid out. I mean, we know, for example, in the UK, this is the centenary of Votes for Women. She has called herself a feminist. In the very few pieces of UK domestic legislation that sit alongside the Brexit legislation, there is a bill for ending domestic violence. She has consistently refused, Theresa May, to fund women's services in the UK that are struggling to deal with this epidemic of violence. She is funding a £5 million police operation so that Trump can go golfing. She has said that she wants to support and end domestic violence. She has not said anything support an end to domestic violence. She has said nothing about the fact that Jeff Sessions recently decreed that the US would withdraw asylum protections for women arriving, seeking asylum from domestic.
I understand what you're saying, but may I just say that if you're asking somebody for something, you don't tell them what's wrong with them the whole time.
No, but the point is that she could be also, well, actually, I think with Trump you have to. I mean, the more supine you are with him, the more he will walk all over you. And we have seen other leaders take him on. We've seen Merkel say straight off the bat, you know, our relationship with the US is going to be based on human rights and respect for others. Macron met him, but at the same time is saying to American climate scientists, you know, you're welcome here. Absolutely. Even when Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan were best friends, Thatcher made no bones at all about saying when she disagreed with Reagan, when she thought that his talks on nuclear disarmament with the Russians were going too far. And I think absolutely she needs to stand up to it.
But you have to understand that when it was Thatcher-Reagan, there was no prospect of Britain withdrawing from Europe and needing a trade agreement with the United States.
And that's what makes it even more important that she stands up to him now. Because, I mean, we saw the Sunday papers were full of comments from the Trump administration calling her a lame girl Friday, you know, that he's talking about how he's tired of her school mistressy tone. I think she absolutely should go into him and go into those meetings and say, right, if you want to talk about militarism, if you want to talk about defence, here's an idea. Let's talk about gender equality. Gender equality is the biggest signifier of peace all around the world, far more than democracy and GDP.
OK, let's go back in history and take a look at when the United States helped Britain out. Second World War, well, it only helped Britain out when it needed to because it had been attacked, and then the Lend-Lease agreement was ruinous to the British economy. Britain got very little out of it other than the fact American troops came over and probably helped to save Europe as a continent. Yes, okay, but it was done on America's terms. When it came to the Falklands War, the other thing that is held up as this, the American administration did not want Argentina to fall because it was backing the anti-communists down there. And it was only one person, Caspar Weinberger, who actually said, look, we will help you. So there is no great history of Americans through altruism saying we're going to back Britain.
In fact, the U.S. has never espoused that this is about altruism. This is about foreign policy. It's about economic success and security for the U.S. And currently, Trump does not really place Britain in a position where it's needed for security or economic prosperity in the U.S. Whether that's right or wrong is certainly debatable, but he is not valuing the place of Britain in the world in that regard.
So does Britain have any cards to play? Like back in the 1980s, it was able to say, you can use our bases where we can park our nuclear bombers. Does Britain have any cards left to play?
I think that Trump has shown that he really is affected personally by attacks on his character. Those really do bother him. Not always. Sometimes he dismisses them, but quite often that's what he's tweeting about, right? Is to say that he's a genius and to say that he's the best person he knows, to say that he's not racist, he's the least racist person he knows, etc. So in that sense, I think that it's possible that protests like this will get to him. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to change the decisions he makes, but I do think that they could get to him.
Drew said he didn't believe that to be the case, but in what way would it get to him? What difference would it make?
Well, I think it would make the sort of difference that we've seen a lot, which is not necessarily that great, which is that he'll tweet about it. He may get his feelings hurt about it. I don't know that it's
practical differences.
Practical differences, unless Theresa May responds to them, I'm not sure that there are many. The only thing that it will offer is the ability of people to say that he's not popular in other places.
Come to you in a minute, Drew. I will come to you in a minute, but your protest, tell us a little bit about what you hope to achieve. You said it was a victory already, but it's not really, is it? I mean, flying a big balloon over London with Trump looking like
that's
a baby.
One part of the protest,
So
and as we've already said, these kind of things get under his skin. So that's one thing that will be happening, and I think it's a testament to British people's ability to use satire and mockery to make political points. But the main protest will have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people marching through the streets across the UK, but especially through London, which Trump is avoiding at all costs, and speaking out against them. And I think there's two particular reasons why this is important. One is on this question of the special relationship. We've talked a lot about trade, but the reality is that our special relationship, so-called, with the US is more based on our foreign policy. And for a long time, Britain's foreign policy has been decided in Washington. We only need to look at the recent bombing campaign in Syria, where Theresa May jumped overnight without any democratic mandate to bomb Syria on the whims of Trump, to see that that is the case. And so our protests aim to undermine that, firstly. And secondly, Trump is literally the embodiment of all the values that we stand against. His racism, his sexism, homophobia, climate change denial. And we do aim to make that vocal, because the effect that his policies have harm millions of people, and they have a significant influence on boosting the far right and hate crimes here in the UK. After his inauguration, we saw a spike in Islamophobic hate crimes here in the UK, and we need to take a stand against that.
Let me put this to you. A bad friend is better than any enemy. So who would you rather have? Trump as a bad friend, or perhaps the Ayatollahs in Tehran, or Kim?
I mean, this is not either or.
You get what it is.
No,
right now it is.
It's really not.
I think
It's really not.
May is answering that question the way you're suggesting, though. She is saying she would rather have Trump as a bad friend, and to keep the door open for relations with the U.S. as long as possible. As soon as she shuts it, it is pretty well shut, and it's harder to open.
This is a man who refers to immigrants as poisonous snakes and infestations, and locks children in cages, you know, and is happy to boast about sexually assaulting women. This is not the kind of person you'd want to refer to a friend in any context, bad or otherwise.
Other than that, he represents the office of the President of the United States.
Well, that's a problem, and that's something we need to get across, that this is not okay.
So in what sense is it not either or?
Well, because I think that we have to reset. I mean, the idea that Theresa May has to go along with this is simply absurd. I mean, I think that you know, it's her job to get the best deal for Britain. That's an incredibly difficult task at the best of times, let alone that she's, you know, her cabinet is crumbling behind her and she's dealing with a man whose idea of a deal is doing the other person over. You know, he's pulled out of the Paris climate change deal, he's pulled out of the Iran agreement, he's renegotiating NATO, he's renegotiating the WTO.
He's renegotiating the West relationship with a very dangerous regime also, North Korea.
Well, right, but the whole thing about North Korea is two strong men using conversations between each other to reinforce their strong men status with their domestic audiences. North Korea is already calling the US, I think a bunch of gangsters was
but would you change your tune if he got North Korea to denuclearise?
I don't think there's any chance of
that. No, I'm saying if he did.
But I don't think. But I'm not.
We didn't think there was any chance he'd be elected.
I'm not interested in ifs. I'm interested in the fact that we are dealing with a man who, as you have pointed out, basically encourages fear and division in a way that we are seeing echoing in this country post-referendum. And that's really dangerous.
Has Trump simply acted too tight, or have we seen some major surprises since he became president? Drew first.
Yeah, well, look, I do think Trump, he started off a bit rocky, but I think he's really smoothed out. His popularity right now in the U.S. is actually soaring. The top pollsters, the top pollsters who are closest to the election have him above Reagan and Obama at this point in their presidency.
But they're not running, so.
But
oddly, they're not going to be running.
But
no, has he done things that you didn't expect?
Has he done things that I didn't expect?
Did you just tell us
Rasmussen. They had a poll come out last week. Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, but what's the number, the percentage of his popularity?
It was 46% approve and about 17% have no opinion.
I said, has he done things since he became president which have surprised you? And you can come in with your...
I will, thanks.
I mean, go look it up if you don't believe me. Has he done things that have surprised me since he was president? Well, I think his second year, half of this year so far has been very different than his first year. I think he's changed a lot. I think he's matured a lot politically. So, you know, I think his political philosophy has changed a lot. Has he done anything major that I didn't expect him to do? No, he's followed a lot of his promises, appointing conservative Supreme Court justices, pulling us out of a failed Iran deal, which I believe makes the world, which you can go back and watch the last time I was on Roundtable rant. I won't rant
We were talking about the Iran deal, weren't we?
Pulling out of the Iran deal, recognizing fact that the capital of Israel is Jerusalem. I mean, we have a president that's willing to actually recognize fact.
Gina, jump in.
Yeah, so I'd like to go back first to the polls. Yes, I saw the polls that he has 46% popularity, but in a similar economy, Reagan was at well over 67% popularity, over 70. In a similar economy, Bush was much higher as well. Clinton was over 70%. And so to say that he is more popular than Reagan or than Obama were is what I was questioning. And I don't think that his numbers have ever been or ever shown with similar circumstances, if you look across the board and control for the factors that we're looking at, that his popularity has ever been that high. In fact, I think that a lot of the decisions he's making it's very clearly eroding his chance to be as popular as those presidents were. However, he still is more popular than he has been in the past, and that is something that's worth thinking about. That doesn't mean, though, that he is or isn't worth negotiating with, right? When we look at a president of the United States in this day and age, he is still the leader of what is currently still the most powerful country in the world, militarily and economically. And although America's power in those regards is waning and has been for a while, that's still his position. And the question for Theresa May is, will she have discussions with him and try to see where there is common ground or what can be achieved, or will she cut off those altogether based on the differences that we all know exist? And I think she is playing and walking a very, very thin line, but trying to keep things open to find as much as she can.
Well, he's over here, isn't he, to try to persuade the EU to put more money into defence spending so that he can look big in front of Russia. I would like Theresa May to be talking to him about the importance, as I said at the beginning, of, and we haven't had a chance to explore, of maintaining gender equality as an anti-militaristic way towards peace and security, which is proven to be much, much more effective. And I would also like her to be resetting her relationship with him on the understanding that we don't do deals with people who are untrustworthy.
Drew, put your water down. Are you looking forward to it?
I'm looking forward to it, and one point, I guess we won't have time to actually get into it, but what I'd like to ask is, look, we have protesters saying, stop Trump, keep Trump out, but then, look, you make great points. If you come from a far left view, why don't you want to talk to Trump?
I'm feminist, I'm not far left. I'm a feminist. It's a different
Sorry.
political ideology.
Oh, this is a different program altogether.
You can have
I
us
want
back
to
to
end
do
with
that
this,
one.
and I think this might make each one of you smile a little bit. It doesn't matter where you come from. Right-wing pundits, this is about the protest. Right-wing pundits are scoffing at what's more or less being branded, the protest, as a state-sanctioned middle finger, a conservative America's great orange defender. Now, if I could have written that, I'd be very proud. We'll see where we are this time next week. Thank you all for coming in. Thank you for watching. It's been Roundtable. I'm David Foster. We hope to have your company next time. Bye for now.